Hey YouTubers, Mike Martin's here with the Mike Martin's channel. Guys, thanks for joining the channel, being part of the channel. Open discussion, discussing. Thanks for your comments below. Very valuable information a lot of people have to share with us. So, some mainstream media outlets are reporting that people are fleeing Cuba so they can come to America to get the vaccine.
Of course they are. Of course they are. Everybody knows that, Mike. Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't it pathetic? It's just unbelievable, isn't it? You're just looking right at them, and they just lie to you.
All right, let me ask you something. It's kind of important.
Okay.
You know how our prime minister loves to jump on geopolitical issues and weigh his opinion on everything, and he knows everything about anything that's ever happened and will happen?
Oh, he's a pretty amazing statesman, yeah.
Yeah. Why hasn't he commented on anything in Cuba? Ever?
Doesn't want to dishonor his real dad, I guess. You know, I mean, you only talk about things that you don't have any complaints about, right? I mean, the way they try to shape things, they don't necessarily want things to be like Cuba, but they like them to be as much like Cuba as possible, and just try to make people accept it. And I suspect to a certain extent he doesn't have any idea what's going on there.
Well, I think the people that inform him. What do they call those people? Informers?
Yeah, advisors.
I think those people don't know if they're tricking, because I see some of those. I see who some of these people are, like some of their health advisor, and their economic advisor. These people, they're a bunch of degenerate losers. They have no idea they can't even speak any other language, but they can't even speak in Spanish to talk to these people, for Christ's sakes.
No, they're. Oh, sorry, I just had to mute this here. Part of the problem is, you know, when you subscribe to a certain way of interpreting the world, and I think it's true of everybody. You know, we all look at the world through our lens, our experiences, the things that ring true to us, and that's why it seems like there's always these two segments of the body politic that are just talking past each other, right? They're just not hearing each other and calling each other idiots, right? When you buy into socialism or socialism light or technocracy, when you buy into progressive politics, when you buy into blank slate, you know, idea of human development, things like that, when you really buy into it, anything that contradicts that is just obviously wrong. You know, and so whether something appears to be working or not, it's just, I mean, to someone like that, it's, hey, Dano, nice to see you there. If there's any trouble at all, if there's mass poverty, if there's crime, if there's unrest, they see it as, well, that's just necessary turbulence to get to the world that we want to build. Right? I mean, this is how it was in the Soviet Union. It's not like everybody in the country was aware that the ideology was a complete failure. They just believed it will inevitably triumph if we just push through, if we just stay the course. It has to work. I know it has to work. It's kind of like somebody in the casino and they're down to the last, you know, $100, right? They know this time they pull the lever or take the cards that this is the one. This is all or nothing. And I just think that's how it is for them. Plus, when you live in, especially when you live in the government and maybe the upper corporate or consulting world, you don't know what it's like to be a farmer. Hey, Layla, you don't know what it's like to be a logger. It's been a long time since you had relatives who did that sort of thing. So you think, okay, well, my granddad was from Alberta and now I'm a lawyer in Ottawa or something like that. So I know all about that stuff. No, you don't. You have no idea how much things have changed in the last even 40 or 50 years. They can't relate to it, right? Their day-to-day lives, especially in the urban bubbles, are insulated from, you know, like you just live in a different layer of society. You know, it's like deep-sea fish, right? If you take those really, really deep-sea fish and you bring them too close to the surface, they explode because they're adjusted to a higher pressure.
Right.
Similarly, if you take a surface creature like a human, you take us down more than 200, 250 feet, you know, we get crushed. It tends to stratify itself after a while, and these things are temporary. It just depends on who's holding power, who the economic elite are at any given time. When we had a large middle class, and middle class was a fairly large segment of society, a lot of people I think could relate more to real life. Mm-hmm. But as society became more stratified, now the people at the top, now they have no idea what the life of Les Miserables is like anymore.
No, it's been a long time, right? It's been a long time since people, like a lot of people don't even remember. Oh, some of the people were too young during the 2007 and 2008 correction to know any of that. And then a lot of people weren't around, aren't old enough to remember the Reaganomics and the whole raising the interest rates and trying to resuscitate the failing economy, right?
Yeah, that's
like
right.
A lot of people weren't around. Like a lot of people are in their 20s and 30s don't even know a lot of this stuff because 20s and 30s they were young teenagers during the 2007-2008 correction, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it's not their fault.
No, it's not.
They were too young and focused on the things that we were focused on when we were, 9, 10, 11, up to say age 20, right? We might have been intelligent, might have been educated, but in terms of actual life experience, no, we didn't have enough trips around the sun yet, Mike. We were dumber than a sack of hammers, frankly. And you see people that there's another channel, Economic Ninja. He talks about it to some of his subscribers. It's kind of the same idea. There are people that were there in 2000, and they were there in 2008, and they don't remember any of it. They just back doing what they were doing. Oh, well, that was terrible, but it was just a one-time thing, right? In the end, markets go up. Real estate only goes up. That line on the chart goes from lower left to upper right. Yeah, there's a hiccup once in a while, but it just keeps going up. It's going to be fine. That's how people think, right? Just because you don't want to think too hard because it takes away from watching Kardashians or, World Cup this or that, right?
I just like how the media is spinning that people are leaving Cuba for the vaccine.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
I could talk about that for 3 hours, dude. I really could.
That's an amazing spin. Like I don't know why they think that.
But you know that people like if you go right now to like parts of Florida or parts of anywhere, even in Canada, somebody could walk in my store and say, "Hey, I got some good news. People are fleeing Cuba now, so they can finally get the vaccine in America." People would say, "Oh, that's good news. I'm so happy to hear that the Cubans are standing up against this lack of vaccinations and getting themselves off that island and getting to America and getting the vaccine." Yeah. They won't. And then if you say, "Well, they're actually leaving because of communism," they'll be like, "No, they don't. Be silly."
Oh, sure. But this has been those two sides talking past each other for since Cuba was taken over by Castro.
I think it should have left it with the mobsters at least over time. It would have found some sort of democratic, like, I guess, fulfillment over after, because the mafia had its grip on it in the 20s, and then after they had to move a majority of their businesses to Florida and New York and Chicago, right? But they were doing really good in they were doing really good in Cuba. They had almost all the casinos. They had all the majority of the whorehouses. They had all the control in Havana. And if they kind of stayed in a way where they would then have to flee, and was it Batista that was in power at the time? Who was it?
Yeah, it was Batista.
And instead of this coup or this takeover that happened, they could have kind of rolled into something a bit better instead of going into full-blown, takeover and communism, right, 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think part of, the mafia was cleaned out of New York, by Giuliani, and there was a lot of organized crime around the world that was eventually taken out by state governments.
Waste management,
all that stuff, yeah. But it does seem like in some ways there were at least various organs in the government that became the mafia instead, right? Like you didn't need. I mean, could Escobar have done what he did if the CIA wasn't either actively helping or at least turning a blind eye? Look at the number of people now that are coming to the United States that are actually being brought in by American military and civil jets, government aircraft. They're flying them by thousands into the country now, all over the lower 48. And at the same time, you've got the people catching them at the border and sending them back. Like, it's just this revolving door. So they've really doubled down on this. But in terms of the drugs and the human trafficking, the rest of it, in some ways, I think they just decided, well, we'll take over these organized crime fiefdoms, and we'll just run them ourselves.
Exactly. So if the organized criminals were, at least it's like us that's there. I'm not saying we are criminals, but it would have been more of, okay, there's criminals there, but they're not political. They're not politically driven. They're not politically influenced, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So eventually it would have steamrolled into getting one of their wise guys to become president type of thing. And they would have kept up the capitalism, right? Because if you notice that once Cuba was taken over, not a single car was imported into that country until the late 90s when they started bringing in Ladas from Russia.
Yeah, that's right. It's the only things they could get, exactly.
So I mean, if they kept it semi-capitalistic and bringing in cars, bringing in this, updates, new fabricated homes, new this, new that in the 60s and 70s when they went through that whole hippie movement and kind of bring a little bit of more democracy to Cuba, it would have been, it would have fallen into where America is. By the 80s and 90s, you would have seen a drastic, from the 30s to the 90s, you would have seen Cuba revolutionize into something different instead of just going into full-blown communism, because then that just takes the country right off life support and there's no more income, no one coming to the casinos, the place just turned into nothing. I've been to Cuba. Well, I know.
It just turned into a hellhole. And it's a real shame. It's kind of the same thing, I think, that happened in Nicaragua with the Sandinistas. Just about anywhere that it's been tried. Venezuela is experiencing it right now.
Panama.
In some ways, Panama, in some ways they're classic Latin American, banana republic kind of things, but they still had electric lights and, basic sanitation and things like that. At least in the cities, they had enough of a functioning infrastructure that at least the potential for someone to accumulate some property and build some wealth and make a better life for themselves was available. In that sense, the capitalist free-for-all, even the oligarchic free-for-all we have now, I would still prefer it to communism, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. Just because, yes, there's wealthy people that own everything, but every once in a while, that ownership changes. Mm-hmm. It's like Monopoly. It doesn't matter if you rule the board. Sooner or later, the game ends, and you go back in the box for someone else to come along.
Because what would you prefer, like the fascism or the communism? Because fascism, they both have lots of cons to them. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think Canada is right now, especially with Canada buying its own debt back, Canada allowing money laundering, Canada allowing banks to do money placements for people that have money they can't move? So
it's kind of a fusion, Mike, of the two systems, because yes, you have this economy that is fascistic in that you have these large corporations that just are eating up more and more of the economic pie that's available outside of the public sector, right? But the money that is used to lubricate it and all the transactions that take place is centrally controlled with an artificially suppressed price. So it's kind of like socialist money running a fascist economy.
That's you know what? Socialist money in a fascist economy. Yeah. Because but where would tyrannical government fall under? Would it be under more? It would be communism, right? More.
Well, I think it would be. I mean, if you centralize power to a certain extent and you've taken more than enough of the economy that it's not possible for the private sector to keep people in homes anymore, and you have to rely on more and more government intervention to give people the basics of life, then you're tending more towards a communist system. The thing about a fascist system is it's a union of government and corporations, mm-hmm. which is also terrible, obviously, but corporations need customers, and you mm-hmm. can't have customers unless everyone's working and getting paid. Right. Both are horrible in their own way. But it always seems that we're, at least in the democracies, we're constantly bouncing between the two extremes. like there's always a hazard of it going too far one way or the other. But it does seem that the one opposite pole eventually exerts enough force on that political center that it starts to move back the other way.
Because are they're easing or they're tapering off. Here's the article here for you guys to see. Bank of Canada to further taper toxic program that helped push home prices higher. So the government, this is just my opinion, they're closing off. They're not buying $3 billion a week in bonds. They're not buying $3 billion. They're buying $2 billion a week now instead. But the problem is, when you see something like this, you know what this means? It means that the public sector is buying out the private sector.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
This is a major issue.
It's a real problem.
Can you maybe explain to us the importance of understanding when this transfer of power starts to tilt like this? Because this is a major issue, and I think this is the one way they're going to get us into this socialistic but tyrannical communist dystopia we're falling into.
That's the dream. As an advisory ahead of time, I'm not a financial expert. I only play one on the Mike Martin show. Okay, but if you get to the point where government is holding the bag on a bunch of overpriced real estate, and all of these mortgage bonds and other things, to my mind, that they're buying are overpriced. Okay, you're trying to socialize the losses. Right. And then it's capitalism when they make money, and it's socialism when they lose money, kind of a thing. Right. If the taxpayer is already holding the bag for a bunch of this stuff through at least their income taxes are paying the interest on this debt. OK, I think that's the idea.
Right.
Then these are terrible, toxic things. And you're running up the bill on your as yet unborn great grandchildren. You're just going to reach a point where people's expectations of at least the opportunity of a middle class life get further and further away. You're going to see more extreme politics. I do think it's still going to swing more populist. Because the idea is the people out on the street who used to be middle class that are now protesting against the government are not protesting for more socialism. They're protesting for the opportunity to have their businesses back. Right, or to have decent paying industrial jobs back and that sort of thing. It gets a nationalist flavor to it after a while, right? Whereas communism and socialism are more internationalist. They're more what you would call globalist.
Right.
Right. It's the same idea. It's just kind of a secular version of Christianity. It's the socialist gospel, and there's no creed or color or anything like that. It's just everybody's the same. We're all one big happy family, one big happy rainbow cookie collective. And they keep trying to sell this, and there's obviously a lot of people that benefit from it, at least temporarily, as long as the government has some cheese to hand out. But sooner or later, that cheese runs out, or it gets watered down so bad that it's not satisfying anybody anymore. But because that we were industrialized countries and advanced democracies with a large and robust middle class that has been eroded, then I think... I just think politics is going to get, I don't know how else to call it, but extreme populist.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to spin it.
If there could be such a thing, that's what I have in mind. It's not going to be a matter of, okay, we're going to seize the means of production at Ford's, car plant, or Anchor Foods or something like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to at least set tax policies and commercial policies, export policies, trade policies, so that the incentive is there to start building that stuff in Canada again. I mean, America was wildly popular when Trump did it. Most of the people that were against him live in the cities, and for the most part, their livelihoods weren't affected because it's an artificial environment. They're always the last to know.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you guys want to support the transmission, don't send me money. Don't buy me coffee. Buy a board game. Or come down and visit me in person here at 1925 Quilchena Avenue in downtown Merritt.